Take it across to Manoj Menon, Director Commercial World Panel Division at Kantar, joining in on the show right now. Manoj, hi, good morning. Good to have you on ET now. Was just going through some of the notes and, urban FMCG consumption, Manoj, is increasingly now tilting towards unbranded products, which have grown about 8.5% on year-on-year so far, outpacing the listed brands. Tell me, what is the underlying driver of this shift that you're seeing in consumer preference?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. I think it's a big statement that we made about the urban consumption is completely moving towards the unbranded. But I think if you're also right when you look at the today in urban India, the unbranded segment is actually contributing to close to 26% of the total FMCG volumes. So that's a big number. Again, it's growing at around 8%. Now, what is interesting to see today, FMCG volume growth is around 4%, but the unbranded segment is growing at around 8%, so almost double of that. Again, there are few categories which are contributing to it, so I wouldn't really say that every single category in the staples or where there is an unbranded place kind of growing faster. But yes, as a segment is kind of still holding pretty good. The 26% share in the market is still big.
Surprised with that shift because, post-COVID, it was all about premiumization and the aspiration and all of that. From that to the switch to unbranded seems pretty unlikely.
So those trends still exist. I mean, the premiumization is still going on. I mean, there is still a branded play happening. In fact, interestingly, let me tweak this differently. I'm saying if you look at many of the listed players, like say, let's take a category like say salty snacks, where there's a high unbranded play because of the Indian namkeens that are playing in. Like Pepsi's managed to convert a lot of those consumers who are buying unbranded to branded. So that's a trend that we're seeing in many categories. Say even in hair oils, for that matter, even there are many. Lots of consumption happen as unbranded, and Marico and Dabur, all of them actually managed to convert unbranded to branded. So I wouldn't say that unbranded is driving the growth completely. It's actually based on few categories. Say, for example, atta wheat, which is the wheat flour, which is growing very significantly on the unbranded play. Now that's the nature of the category. That's not something which is new because the quantity of atta bought as unbranded is pretty huge. In the category, almost 58% of the contribution actually coming from unbranded. So that's a big, the big component which is driving the growth for unbranded.
And Manoj, hi, this is Snehi also joining in. A very interesting trend that I saw in your report is the preference for branded players in the rural segment of the country and the shift towards unbranded in the urban areas of the country. Can you help us understand this contradiction? Because this is a trend that we normally don't see.
Yeah, so if you look at the listed players' performance in urban, actually it's around 2.1% growth that we're seeing for listed players, whereas in rural, we're seeing it is 5.1. Now, the reasons are different. I mean, if you look at rural, there's a lot of investments happen in terms of building the distribution and loyalty, and which is actually helping the listed companies to grow faster in rural. But in come to urban, we are also need to understand we're living in an industry where the food inflation is still pretty high. So I wouldn't say the slower growth for listed companies in urban is all because consumers are moving into unbranded. It's happening in few categories, but a lot of other categories to the other way. I mean, the branded players are actually gaining from unbranded.
Along with that, Mr. Menon, help us understand that how the e-commerce and the quick commerce platforms are now contributing to the growth, especially in the urban areas.
So, if you're coming from a growth standpoint, it's growing very high. I mean, both e-commerce and quick commerce. But from an unbranded story standpoint, it's still not changing the needle because that's still too small to change the whole FMCG gamut. I think it's still small, needle to change. So that's not happening from an unbranded standpoint. But what these channels are actually doing is they're making consumers, shape their psyche to be more brand agnostic. So, and we know that e-commerce and quick commerce are the safe haven for most of the new launches and product categories, and that's actually making the consumers more experimentative, more explorative in time. But from a unbranded, that's not happening. Actually, that's not really leading to a conversion to unbranded or branded.
Another trend that we witnessed in your report is that while urban growth has sustained on a year-on-year basis, rural has taken a dip. However, if you listen to the commentary coming in from most listed FMCG players, they are still saying that urban demand continues to remain sluggish and rural is still holding on. So what are you making of these demand trends we're seeing? Because management commentary is giving a rather different picture about this.
That's right. I mean, as I said, I mean, if you look at the listed companies, growth in urban is 2.1 as compared to a 5.1% growth in rural. So the commentary is right. I think we are seeing a lot of green shoot in rural, and with now predicted good monsoon, which is rural expecting, I think it's going to become even better for from a rural growth standpoint. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, the urban decline is based on various other parameters. It's not only about a movement to unbranded, because it's a high inflation from a food standpoint, which is the marketeers are struggling with. There are trips which are coming down, for the consumers, becoming more need-based in purchase. So there are many other aspects which is playing around apart from the macroeconomic factors. But your commentary is right. I mean, rural is growing faster for the listed companies, 5.1% versus 2.1 in urban India. So it's not very different.
You did tell us that how the unbranded segment is actually impacting the overall growth and how it is rather contributing to the overall growth. But the other thing I wanted to understand is that from the commentary that we are getting to hear from the major FMCG players, sounds a bit sluggish in nature. They are not that optimistic in terms of the volume growth. And one of the reasons perhaps is the emergence of the smaller brands, which are not just disrupting the market, but are also eating into the market share of some of the leaders. Can you help us understand that which categories do you believe that we are getting to see the most impact right now, or which in times ahead, which categories can get impacted?
So the small pack play is actually driving the growth down. I mean, for example, if I take, say, milk food drinks, where the Horlicks and Bonvitas of the world, the small pack is kind of driving down the consumption as a whole. And this is not new. It's been happening for some time. We have seen this in toothpaste, where the rupees 10 packs and rupees 20 packs is gaining momentum, and that is actually also bringing the volumes down. Now, it's a very, very cash-oriented situation for the manufacturers, where these packs may not be very profitable from a production standpoint, but these are there's a consumer demand for these small pack, and therefore they are forced to keep these brands in the portfolio. But in a long term, this is what's happening. Those smaller packs are becoming regular packs for most of the consumers, because at times when you launch with a small pack, saying that it can be a top-up pack for consumers, but that's not the case anymore, because people are getting married to that price point, and that is actually bringing down the volumes quite a lot. Now, on the other side, I mean, we are also seeing price hikes happening to many brands now in the recent past, and then I think what I'm hearing from the market is also there are more price hikes happening. So therefore, I mean, the volume value, that equation is going to change quite a lot in the coming quarters, where we still expect a higher value growth, because on the back of pricing changes, and as Sneha was talking about, the premiumization is still going on. So those are going to drive the value growth, but the volume growth is still challenged from a pure angle of the small pack plays still pretty big in many categories.
And also help us understand that despite overall slowdown in branded consumption, in your report you have mentioned that brands like Sting, Milk Bikis and Sprite are performing well. This is something that we get in any kirana store, any general store, as well as any e-commerce or quick commerce platform. Help us understand what is differentiating their strategy compared to peers in their space, and also what should listed FMCG companies do differently to defend their urban market share, whether in terms of product, design, packaging, pricing, distribution. Help us with that.
So to answer the question of Sprite, and I think the report also talks about two different aspects of it. One is the in-home consumption, other one is the out-of-home consumption. And out-of-home consumption, we are seeing these, like for example, Sting, for that matter, is kind of done very well in terms of the energy drink as a category, has done very well from a out-of-home consumption standpoint. And again, it's a price point, and the targeting is being done right. I mean, it is not. It's not attracting the all consumer sets. There are specific consumer sets who are focused as such. I mean, from a growth standpoint, I think definitely premiumization, one area that we talked about, saying that that's been growing, and it's not a new story that is on the premiumization. This is going on for some time. The growth has kind of slowed down over the last 1 year or so, but I think it's still relevant. especially in the personal care space, it's growing very well. Small pack, irrespective of the fact that it is bringing the volume down, but I think the rupees 20 pack is kind of doing very well. For example, there's a migration that's happening from a rupees 5 and 10 to rupees 20, so that will also help the marketers in some way of fixing the gap that we are seeing on the small pack play with which consumers are doing. So those are some of the strategies, and rural, of course, we've been calling out saying that that's been a green shoot for many marketers, and we've seen the aspirations and experimentation power that rural consumers are showing is pretty much mirroring the urban. So therefore, I think that still continue to be the growth driver, and a lot of companies are now focusing on driving the distribution in rural, and that's actually going to help them in the long run.
Menon, with this, we let you go on that. Really appreciate you taking the time out and speaking with us and giving us a sense that what's really panning out within the FMCG space.
Thank you so much.
But with this, viewers, let's move on. And as Prime Minister Narendra Modi completes first year of